Welcome back to the Business Roundtable Podcast. I am your host, David Carr, founder of Steward Your Business, where we bring great guests to you week after week. And this week, I'm super excited to have a good friend, client, colleague, Talitha Crain of Crain Consulting with us. Talitha is got a wealth of experience you're going to get to learn about. Her journey as an environmental scientist, regulatory specialist, working in corporate, she's worked in manufacturing, academia, research. We're going to break it all down for you, and has started her own firm, which I've been able to get to work with her from ground zero and building it up and doing just amazing work here in Southern California. So Talitha, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. No, super excited to have you here. We're going to have a fun time because we're going to have a place where we're going to share your technical expertise, your leadership, and entrepreneurship skills. In fact, you are nominated for an award here locally in Southern California for Entrepreneur of the Year. I'm super excited and to see what you're doing here. Many environmental professionals and others spend decades working with agencies or consulting firms, but few of them take that and go into making their own practice. And so I want to, number one, applaud you in that, and it's been an honor to work alongside with you. But then I think this conversation today is going to break it down a little bit more about what it takes to step out, to build a firm, to serve clients with integrity. And, I'm excited that you're going to be able to share with our listeners your journey on that. So if you would, Talitha, maybe take us back a little bit on your journey. I've given a little bit of highlights, but take a few minutes here to kind of walk us through your journey entering the environmental consulting world, if you will.
Sure. Well, I have always loved nature and the environment, and just growing up, we didn't have the most abundance, I guess you could say. My parents made a lot of sacrifices for me. I did get to go to a private school, but I was the kid that had the 5 outfits for the whole school year. And so you could imagine sometimes they would give me a hard time. And so that kind of built my motivation, and I knew that I wanted to work hard. I wanted to be able to go to college. I wanted to be able to make it in this world. So, fast forward, I was 15 years old and I started college. One college class while I was in high school, and then I started full-time when I was 16. And that's because of that drive, that hunger for making it in the world. And sorry about my light here. And so once I got into college, I did have some scholarships, but it was, not enough to pay for the tuition. So I was the kid who was working, 3 jobs. I always knew that I needed to get that work experience while I was in college. So I ended up working in a laboratory conducting research for a professor. And then I also did a couple other things on the side to help supplement that because it was minimum wage at the time. And, I look back on that time and it was very challenging because I had to work so many hours while I was going to school full time. And I look at it now and it was a blessing because I was able to choose what I wanted to study. I know sometimes there are kids out there where they go and their parents might pay for it, but they have to study what their parents want them to study.
Right.
And so I had the freedom to study whatever I wanted. And so I did, and I ended up, graduating and ended up, making friends that had some good connections while I was in college, and they helped connect me with my first jobs. And I practiced interviewing. I didn't know how to interview. I didn't know how to prepare a resume, but thankfully, my grandfather was very helpful, and also a lot of the parents of my classmates helped give me advice as well. And so made it through, then I went in and got my master's in business, and I got my master's in engineering. All of that while working full time. I worked in, like you said, I worked in academia, I worked in manufacturing, I worked for the government, I worked for the, two government agencies. I worked for consulting, and so I was able to get a very broad view of all of these different types of jobs, and uh, it was very fascinating to observe. And one of the things that I learned early on is that work ethic is so important, because
Mhm. Yeah.
sometimes you have a lot of competition around you, and there's a lot of smart people out there, but not
Yes.
every smart person has a strong work ethic. And
That's
if you have
true.
work ethic, that is really going to help you. Not to say that I'm not smart, I'm smart, but there's always going to be someone smarter than you.
Yes.
So given that, why not get a leg up and maintain that work ethic, and doing something meaningful? So
Mhm.
I was the person who was always volunteering to do extra projects. I never said that's not my job. I was I was ready to go. I was ready to learn something new. My boss didn't want to travel. I traveled for him. I did whatever was an opportunity. And because of that, I was able to get a lot of experience, and a lot of different experience,
Mhm.
and kind of hone my path. And it was a very natural path. My education, I studied what I wanted. I ended up working in the sciences, and then transitioning into the regulatory field because I just love the environment. And then from there, in many in there as well. Um, from there, I moved into the consulting world, and that is kind of like, the way I view consulting is, it's like halfway between a government job and halfway between your own business. So
Mm.
you
Yeah, yeah.
definitely need to have an awareness of how business works, and
Yes.
in all of these jobs, really. But you feel more secure, I would say, with a government job, because you have, the regular paycheck, you have the regular work to do. But in consulting, it's, you have billable hours to consider.
Yep.
And so
Absolutely.
that's kind of like where, you kind of have your own business, right? You want to make sure that,
Mhm.
you know, in the early stages, you are the best worker for the main project manager. You are
Mhm.
on top of things, you are watching the budget, you are asking good questions, you're trying to predict problems before they occur and solve them ahead of time, and then become invaluable to the amazing project managers that are giving you work. Then you kind
Yes.
of evolve and become this project manager, and um, and so I got to that point, and then became principal engineer, account manager, client manager, all of these different types of things. And they have all these trainings, which is amazing because you get to learn so much. And um, Again, just maintaining that whole I volunteer for everything throughout the process. Ultimately, you
Mhm.
get to a point where you're just thinking to yourself, gosh, I know how to do all of these different elements. Maybe I can go off
Yes.
on my own. So,
Yes.
really, what I would say is, learn everything about the business you want to start, and then start it. And so you
Mhm.
can do that throughout your career process. And that's
Yes.
going to help you ensure that when you do start your own business, that it is a successful business, because you'll have gotten this experience along the way and this wisdom along the way. Maybe get burned along the way a couple
Yeah,
times,
that's part of learning,
but
yes.
yeah, yeah. And then, okay, I'm not going to get burned like that again. So
Exactly. Yeah.
so so ultimately, that's how I ended up getting to the point, where I was able to start my own business, and then plus I have wonderful, wonderful client who just, I adore, and they gave me a
Yes.
chance. And so that's been very helpful as well.
Yes.
Um, and, just be strong and you can do
There you
it.
go. There you
Yeah.
go. No, there's so much I want to unpack in there and that you shared there, Talitha. Part of what I heard you say was, volunteer, be coachable, keep learning. And I call that a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, Talitha. To me, that sounds like that has served you well in your journey as a professional and now business owner, to have that ability to continue to grow, to be coachable. Can you talk just briefly about that?
Oh, yes, definitely. And sometimes, you want to be confident, right? But
Hmm.
sometimes if you're not careful, your ego can get in the way. And
Hmm.
so you want to just allow yourself to be taught, to be helped, to be underestimated. And, truthfully, I've gotten underestimated for quite a long time. And, people end up surprised. And guess what? Use it to your advantage.
Yes. Yes.
You can find a way to use that to your advantage. And that's partly what I do and did. A
Hmm.
lot of times if I'm getting underestimated, it doesn't hurt my ego.
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes people will like to help you, and they want to teach you things. And just because I might already know it, it doesn't mean that there might not be something else I can learn about it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I am very open-minded to hearing these different approaches, because maybe it might be something I hadn't thought of before. And then I can add that to my toolkit.
Yes. Yeah,
So
that's great.
yeah.
Well, again, I think if people are listening to this, if you're a business owner or in a leader position, you might think you know this all, but if you can just, like you said, Talitha, kind of take it back down and just, okay, let me just be open. And maybe there's something that I mean, I know I've read something in a document before, or a book, and I it just never saw it be there before. And I go back and read it again. I'm like, how did I miss this? How did I not see this? And it's just
Yeah.
because at a certain time, in a certain place, or we didn't have the awareness, and now we do. And so, I think to your and taking all those things, I agree with you, Talitha, of taking all these life experiences, and sometimes at the time it doesn't feel like it was a positive one. Maybe I was challenged, or somebody undermined me, or I didn't feel that support, but yet you said, okay, how can I learn from this? And I think that's such a powerful way of life, because I see that in the way you run your business. Getting to work with you through Steward Your Business is how you show up and how you handle challenges, and how one of the things I think really stood out to me, Talitha, when I started working with you, is even before you started working, you had different people helping you in different aspects of your business, and you could continue to bring in and collaborate with other people. And I think uh, that's remarkable. And I think business owners that do that are going to get along faster, further, than they would if they hold out and they just try to grit it on and do it on their own. And that's not what I'm hearing you do. You didn't say, "Oh, I'm just going to just do it on my own and go my own
Um,
way." It's, I'm listening and learning from other people and constantly developing myself so I can be in a better place to serve those that I get to have the opportunity to.
Yeah, and I was kind of inspired by the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, and the story of
Mm.
Robert Kiyosaki, and
Yes, yes.
how his friend's dad gave him these ideas and these thoughts that he just ran with.
Hmm.
And so I am fully on board with, you know, go out there and network, make some good friends, you know, if their parents want to help you, fantastic, or
Hmm.
mentor you in some way, go
Yes.
for it. And it's just it's kind people who want to help. And if you are the person who shows that you want to be helped, then they will more likely want to help you.
Yes.
But if you're coming across like you just don't want to hear it because you know everything, you're kind of blocking yourself off from some new information. And to this day, 100 years later, um, I am still open to that potential of mentorship or assistance and that sort of thing. But I also want to give back.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely get back. One of the tools that we've used together, Talitha, to your point, is called the Five Voices framework, which you've taken, and you're the pioneer voice, is your first voice. And what I want to say that if you haven't taken the Five Voices assessment, we'll put a link in the show notes. You guys can take that. But what I want to say is, sometimes pioneers get a bad rap. To your point, Talitha, in my experience, because they think they know it all and they're pushing so hard. But what a pioneer that's has this emotional intelligence, if you will, EQ. They're able to, like what you said, listen and learn and like take input from other people, and then empower them too. And I know we just had a call recently where we're talking to a few folks in the call and understanding the different voices, if you will, and where they're coming from. And I think that's the power of that work that you've been doing in yourself, is like, okay, I know who authentically I am, but what is it like to be in the other side of me, and how do I work with other people? I think that, to me, I've observed in your direct success, Talitha.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very helpful to understand those voices because you can kind of predict who you're going to naturally click with and
Hmm.
maybe who might rub you the wrong way.
Right.
And the important thing is to know that, you know, it's it's something that you can predict, and because of that, you can use it as a tool as well. And
Yeah.
also, just because someone rubs you the wrong way doesn't mean that they're not a fantastic worker or a
Yes.
fantastic, uh, whatever they are, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
They could be fabulous, and just because they rub me the wrong way doesn't mean that they are terrible at what they do.
Right.
And in fact, it may complement me in some way. So, for example, um, I know the pioneers don't, they go really fast, and
Yeah.
another voice might be a little overwhelmed by it,
Yes. Yes.
and just knowing that, you know, communicating that, okay, this is how I am. So you might think I'm a little crazy. and
You like
um,
disarm them a little bit, right? I think we were on a
right,
call
but
there, and I saw the person's face, and they're like, "Oh," almost like it was a relief, like when they thought, "Oh, you mean, oh, okay, you mean you're giving me permission to be who?" Essentially, you're affirming who I'm at and where I'm coming from, and I don't have to be like you.
right.
Hmm.
And in fact, I might go to them and ask for advice on something
Hmm.
that I know that I'm weak at.
Yes.
Um, and so it works out. But, does it change the fact that maybe there's a little friction? Maybe not, but you can minimize that friction, and you know that it's coming from a good place. And if it's coming
Hmm.
from a good place and it's honest and direct, then, you know, there's a way to turn it into something better.
Yes. Well, and I want to dive a little deeper here to your environmental work specifically, because uh, for those of you that aren't in that space, the environmental consulting world requires a lot of coordination. You've got regulators, you've got technical specialists like engineers or contractors, construction, you've got clients. Um, Along your journey, and we're using voices as one of these tools, but what leadership lessons have you learned in dealing in being in that complexity? You even have to deal with politics sometimes, depending on what that looks like too. Talita. What does that come up with you, whether it's before running Crain Consulting or even
Mhm.
Crain Consulting, that as a business owner or a leader that they can apply and have maybe greater awareness about?
Yes. Um, okay, so this is gonna sound funny, but I have a jerk filter, right? And and the reason I have my little jerk filter on at
Yep.
times is because I have learned that it's not a good thing to judge people on their personality. You
Mm,
could have the roughest, toughest client, and it might be so challenging to work with them, but then they turn around and surprise you because they are your biggest champion, and
mm,
they will spread the word to so many people and help you out.
mhm.
Yes, they gave me a hard time, but I have my filter on, so I'm
Yeah.
good.
Yes,
And
yes,
I
yes.
Or you might have a client that, conversely is like amazingly kind and all of these things, but then maybe they are, maybe gone or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to
Mm-hmm.
get a hold of them, and that sort of thing. I mean, it's a whole bunch of different possible scenarios, but the bottom line is just because someone is rough and tough to you doesn't mean that they're not going to be your biggest champion. And they might be the people that make you grow the most, and
Mm-hmm.
in a good way, in a good
Yes,
way.
yes. Yeah. So I hear you saying what I hear you saying that in one of the tools I use is called a support challenge matrix. And part of it is what you just said. Some people are more high support, they're really nice, or that, really, but then they don't give you the challenge that you need. And there's other times where you really need the challenge as well. Like, come on, rise up, let's get this going, let's make this happen. And so it's finding that intersection between the two, if you will, because we don't want to be all one or all the other.
Yeah.
And we have to know where people are at too, because if I give somebody that is really struggling more challenge, they're probably not going to rise up. And on the other side, I'm giving too much support. I'm like, no, they need to be challenged. They're not rising up enough, to what you were saying earlier, Talitha. And I think from a leadership perspective, what I'm hearing you say is you've been able to do this successfully with your team, with clients, even with outside agencies, of like, okay, where do we bring that? And that's nuance, and that's beyond what I'm getting at, is that's beyond your technical skills.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, what I find, maybe speak to this, Talitha, because sometimes what I found, you've been doing this work for quite a while, and I'm just one person on the journey helping you here. But talk to a lot of people that I know you're going to Long Beach State University coming up here and speaking to students, and I'm doing that too. But speak to the students and maybe the younger professionals that, or maybe even older ones, that are just focusing on their technical skills purely. They're like, oh, I'm just going to get another degree, or I'm going to get another, but they're not doing this other work like you just talked about.
Yes, so it's very important that you learn interviewing skills and
Mm-hmm.
soft skills like being able to be a diplomat.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you're an engineer on a construction site and, you know, structural engineer, let's just
Mm-hmm.
say, and then the regulator comes out and says, oh, well, this isn't good. Um, you might think it's good, but they don't think it's good. And
Mm-hmm.
so you have to figure out, hey, can I be more diplomatic?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a bad thing to be diplomatic, because you're just making it easier to translate. It's like a translation exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can anticipate questions ahead of time, that's going to be super helpful too,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you feel like you're getting you know what was the term I used? If people are it'll come back to me.
Yeah.
um, but basically, you can be that diplomat, and you can
Yeah.
find that inner diplomat to figure out the problem. And you kind of have to have that filter on and not take things personal, and you kind of build that resilience over time.
Mm-hmm.
And you just try not to get triggered, and you do the best you can,
Yeah.
and keep a positive attitude. And just know that even if people underestimate you, that's the word I was looking for.
Underestimate. Yes.
Yes, if people underestimate you, what's going to help with that is if you can kind of see a few steps ahead and try to predict, oh
Mm-hmm.
gosh, this problem is going to be coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but we're going to have to fix it. So how do I tell this to the team? Okay, well, if you're telling it to a construction crew, that's one thing, right? If you're
Yep.
telling it to a regulator, that's another thing. They
Mm-hmm.
might both think they're doing the same thing. For example, the construction crew might be like, well, we're on schedule, we're on budget,
Mm-hmm.
the work is getting done, blah, blah, blah. And the regulator comes on site and is telling them, no, this is not right. You need to do X, Y, and Z. So
Mm-hmm.
now, you act as the mediator, the diplomat in between, and kind of translate between the two.
Yes. Well, to your point, I think this is, you know, environmental consulting and beyond, but because of all your years of experience, Talitha, and working with these things, you mentioned this earlier about being proactive and not so reactive. Like you're paying attention to what it's not a problem right now at the media, it's not blowing up, but there's some indicators that are coming through. You're starting to see some indicators, maybe like increased scrutiny, or there's some new initiatives out there, or these are like, these could be an issue. And I think that's what I'm hearing you say about be proactive, pay attention in how people are responding to each other, are and speak to a little bit further about that proactive approach versus reactive approach. Because
Yeah.
particularly, I'm asking this because I work with young professionals too, Talitha, and sometimes I'm
Mhm.
like I'd rather just not say anything, and I'm just going to sit back and wait till somebody comes and knocks on my door or makes it an issue. And that's kind of waiting to be reactive. Can you talk a little bit about those
Right.
folks that are kind of putting
Well,
hunkering
and
down?
and sometimes you have some tough conversations that you're gonna have to
Mm,
have, and especially if it costs money,
yep.
then you're gonna need to be prepared. And
Mhm.
so, you kind of like bounce some ideas off of yourself, like, okay, well, if I was a construction person, what kind of questions would I ask before I have to go break the news that they have to, follow this X, Y, and Z law by building X, A, B, and C.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
they're not going to want to hear it because it's going to cost money, right? And
Yep.
so, what kind of questions are they going to ask, and how can I be prepared to respond to those questions
Right.
ahead of those discussions? Because you betcha they're going to ask, and you can bounce ideas off of yourself, your inner interrogator.
Yeah.
You could bounce ideas off of AI. You could ask AI. You could tell AI, "Hey, you're a construction expert, and I want to know, I need to tell you this, and I know you're not going to be happy about it because
Right.
it's going to cost this much money. What kind of questions are you going to ask me?" And then
Mhm.
you can kind of take a look at those responses. I mean, I don't know if the responses are going to be good from AI. You're going to have to
Yeah.
check that yourself.
Yep.
But, you can always get prepared in some form or fashion. You can bounce ideas off of your colleagues. You can
Yeah.
bounce ideas off of a coach.
Yep.
Um, yeah, things
Absolutely.
like that. But just having those answers early, you're going to surprise a lot of people.
Right? Or you've at least thought through it, or you have some
Yeah,
possible solution. It may not be the solution, which kind of leads
right.
me into my follow-up question for you, Talitha. As a small, woman-owned business here, you're in California. I'd like to just share for those folks that haven't maybe worked with a smaller firm before. Maybe sometimes they're just thinking, I'm just going to go to the big company. But talk a little bit about what a unique experience it is to work with. You've got a great client in the school district and others, but talk a little bit about, for those of folks that are considering, you know, maybe they've never thought about hiring a smaller firm before. What does that look like, and how does that compare to maybe these humongous, gigantic, large multinational firms, for example?
Yeah, yeah. So I worked for an international consulting firm for several years. Let's say, quite a long time.
Hmm.
Um, but um, I would say that when you're working with a smaller company, they can be more nimble. There's less bureaucracy because as those companies grow, there's more and more bureaucracy, more and more need for getting permission from this person and that person and escalating it up the ranks.
Right.
So when you're dealing with a smaller company, we're more nimble.
Hmm.
Um, so it's easier to make those decisions, and you can get those decisions made faster,
Hmm.
which is, and also we're cheaper because we have less overhead.
Hmm.
So that is something that that helps out the clients as well.
Talk a little bit too about, because I think unique to, not unique, but it's definitely, in our experience, and I've spent 25 plus years in the environmental consulting space as well. But speak a little bit, Talitha, about, so there's one thing if I'm coming to hire on, but I think what's unique about small businesses and things that you and I've been working on in business development, for example, is building those relationships with you're a subcontractor and they're a prime contractor, and talk a little bit about what that relationship is like as well, Talitha.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you definitely want to be business savvy and get the right prime. Um, I'm a subcontractor to, various firms,
Hmm.
and a lot of times they may have like procurement requirements they need to meet to support small businesses locally and that sort of thing. And so a lot of folks will reach out to me to team up with them. To get on their proposals and that sort
Yep.
of thing. Um, you want to make sure that the company that you are you're the subcontractor, right? And so you want to make sure that they pay well, right? Because
Hmm.
the sad truth is sometimes there can be folks that won't pay you, or they may give you a hard time to pay you and that sort of
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
So sometimes it's preferable to get those government contracts because it's, easier to get paid
Hmm.
than with private industry. So I just, not always, there are good
Yeah, sure.
players. It's just you have to be careful because you don't want to put in a ton of work and then never get paid for it.
Yeah.
So that, there are things you can do. You can look at the Dun and Bradstreet of the various companies to kind of get an
Hmm.
idea of their credit, and how if there's any thoughts on the Better Business Bureau on the company as well. You want to be smart about it as well.
And I think, to your point, Talitha, and you built great relationships over time, and so
Yes.
it's understanding that it's a two-way street is what I hear
Mhm.
too. It's like you're fulfilling a specific designation, but it's also because you're technically savvy, you're a good a teaming partner,
Yeah.
communicating well earlier to what we talked about, being proactive versus reactive, being solutions oriented. And by the way, you guys, if you want to follow, we're going to put on the show notes how to follow Crain Consulting. Talitha has a blog and some great things in her LinkedIn page. So we want to make sure you guys follow along there and connect. We're on LinkedIn together, so you can connect in with Talitha if you have more questions or want to learn more about Crain Consulting and what they're doing here. I mean, based in Southern California, but really you can do work in a lot of different areas. So to talk a little bit about that too, about your approach to work and as a business owner, doing business development and looking for those opportunities.
Yeah, yeah. So one thing I've learned is, those relationships are really the most important. Uh, I mean, if you're like responding to an RFP, yes, you can win it without knowing anyone, but it's tougher.
Hmm.
If you know folks, then at least they're aware of your reputation. They're
Hmm.
aware that you're out there, that they're aware you're a real person,
Right.
because nowadays with so much AI out there,
Hmm.
um, sometimes you just don't know.
Right.
And so really getting out there and networking is a really good thing to do. Even in high school and in college, get out there, get your name out there. It's not something that came naturally to me. It's a skill and you have to
Yep.
develop it. And it can become fun. People always tell me they expect me to be an extrovert, but I think really I might be a bit of an introvert because for me, the networking process is a little challenging even
Yeah.
to this day. But there are ways to make the most of it. You might go with someone who you've met at an event and you guys have complementary businesses and you can introduce one another,
Yes,
so
exactly.
that you don't have to be like the person at the meeting, just kind of being, hi, I'm Talitha, here's my business card, can I do something for you?
Right. Right.
you know
Yeah.
and you want people to be aware of what you do, who you are, but without that whole like, you know, painful part of the networking. And some of you might just adore networking and I'm so jealous. I wish I did.
Well, I think what you're hitting at too, Talisa, is understand where your strengths are. And we talk about this in the five voices about how you show up in different ways. And what I love about your particular voice, being a pioneer, visionary, seeing all these things that are possibilities. And I think if you lean in that superpower, and when I've seen you work with other um, clients and pursuing things, is that you see how you can help them in ways that they can make things better. And I think they appreciate that, and you lean into that. And if it's like, oh, it's like, I don't say minutia, but getting all these little pieces in there, you're like, you have people on your team to help you in that, because you could do it, but it's not the best use of your energy and focus. And so I think as a business owner, I just encouraged by the way that you are leading, and I'm grateful to become alongside that. But I hope those that are listening here take assessment of themselves and see what really energizes them. And we have to do things that, quite honestly, aren't the most energizing at times, but try to minimize those and have other people help you along the way.
Yes, yes. And
Yeah.
don't worry if you need that help. And
Right.
sometimes you may not even need the help, but maybe you need the time. And so maybe you're
Mm,
purchasing your time.
yes.
Because you don't want to be out there 150 hours a week.
No. Definitely not. Definitely not. I mean, I'm sure we can definitely go on, Talitha. There's a lot being here. I'm encouraged by the fact of your journey that you walked us through, and now having gone Crain Consulting, and in the continued success that I see, and I'm grateful to be a part of the journey. But as we're wrapping this up, and we're kind of getting into this episode of the podcast, I want you to just reflect maybe here, Talitha, for a moment. And we've covered a lot of ground, but what would you encourage somebody that is, that maybe hasn't taken the step yet? It could be either that, or I'll ask you two ones: that maybe hasn't taken the step, and number two, if they have taken the step in the business, but they're feeling a little stuck or a little overwhelmed, what would you encourage them to do? So those are kind of my ask. And if you have something else you want to add in there, by all means, please share with our audience.
So let's say you haven't
So
started
the
yet.
person that's thinking about leaving, or that started that, like you said, maybe they're in the consulting,
Yeah.
but they haven't taken that step yet. What would you encourage them there first?
I would encourage them to start practicing courageous discussions.
Mm,
Having difficult conversations is
mhm.
a good practice when you have something come up and you're like, oh, great, now I have to like bring this up. Well, now that's an opportunity. And
Yes.
you want to practice having those hard conversations because there's always going to be hard conversations,
Yeah.
and you want to start to get good at them and not be scared of them.
Mhm.
Um, if
Yeah.
you also want to volunteer for everything like we mentioned at the very beginning.
Get in
Learn
there.
every aspect. Get in
Yeah.
there, learn project management, learn human resources, learn contracts, learn some of the legal stuff, learn business
Yep.
development, get to know the different players,
Mhm.
and get to a point where you feel strong
Yes.
enough to just, hey, I know a lot now. I can do this. And even if you don't think you can,
Mhm.
you're going to surprise yourself because you're going to be able to do it. Now, for those of you who are in your business and you're feeling overwhelmed, I think every business owner feels overwhelmed at some point or another. And one thing that is comforting to me is knowing I'm not the only one. And having that coach
Yes.
is very
Yeah.
helpful, and having a good
Yeah.
team of advisors. There's a lot of fractional support out there that
Mhm.
that you can hire on. And for example, I could, like Dave helps me. He's my business coach. I also have um,
Mhm.
a CPA, and I tag her on tax related questions. And then I have my attorney who sets up my S corp. I have a contracts attorney. Different people are there for you, and you can build your own network and use them as needed. You don't need to have them on full time right away until your business grows and grows and grows, and then you can bring people on full time in those roles. But it's nice to have that fractional support and identifying the good players early on, through
Yeah.
perhaps other people that who have started their businesses, and they have someone they can recommend, and you can interview them and interview others as well, and then make a decision. Get that in place. I would say set up your business the way you want it before diving in so that you don't have a mess of paperwork. So, I started off as an S corp, but if, others are at a LLC or, different things, sometimes it's hard to
Mhm.
transition from one to the
Yep.
other. So maybe put some thought into how you want to structure that business. And then keep don't get overwhelmed. I know that's easier said than done, and I do have a regular meditation practice, and or you can
Mm.
meditate. I have
Mhm.
meditate, pray, whatever works for you.
Yes. Yes.
Having that quiet time is very helpful because it
Mm.
brings out the noise, and you get back to who you are
Mhm.
without all of the voices kind of around you.
Yes.
Um, and then you can sometimes get clarity on what the next step is. So I know maybe that sounds a little out there, but hey, I'm not the only business owner that does it. I'm just maybe one of the few that admit
No,
it.
I'm the same way, Talitha. I think that's
Mhm.
fantastic. I
Yeah.
mean, that's, kind of the nugget there. If you're not doing that, you probably need to do more of taking, yeah, meditation for sure, quiet time, reflecting, taking some time out of the day to day is so powerful. And Talitha, I'm excited to see your continued growth in your journey here. You guys definitely need to connect with Talitha on LinkedIn. Follow along, Crain Consulting there. I just want to say thank you for being on the podcast, Talitha. It was a real joy to have you here. And I don't always get clients to get them on the podcast, so I'm glad you were willing to come on and share with our audience a little bit of your journey.
Thank you so much. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely. Well, we appreciate y'all liking and subscribing and all that good stuff. If you have any comments, please go ahead and leave them here. Wherever you're listening to the podcast, we'll make sure that Talitha gets them. And we hope you will come back, share the podcast with others that may benefit from this, particularly if they're a business owner or a woman that is working and wanting to create something, a legacy like Talitha is doing. And we would love to have you guys share your notes. Thank you for being a part of the journey. Until next time, be well. Thanks, everybody.